Pushing her bike, my aunt led the way through the front gate and around the side of the house to the back door. She fumbled in her bag for the key, marched up the steps, and unlocked the door. "Bring that bag in here. Then you can carry in the shopping and put it away tidily. Put the parcel in the hall cupboard. I'll open it later. When you've done that, put my bike in the shed. I'm going to run my bath. You can take your bath afterwards." "I'm going to have a bath," I said to myself. What would it be like? As far as I could remember, I'd never ever taken a bath. At the orphanage, Saturday night was shower night, just before bedtime. My aunt went into the bathroom, and as I stowed the groceries, I heard her fiddling with the large gas-fired water heater. A match scratched, and there was a muffled whoomph as the main jet of the geyser lit up, accompanied by the splash of running water. As I wheeled her bicycle down the garden path to the shed, I wondered what my aunt's bath ritual would be like. Would the bath be piping hot and overflowing with airy suds? I was soon to find out. At the orphanage, the girls and the boys bathed on different days. There wasn't enough hot water for all of us on the same day. The girls had a separate dormitory, so I don't know how it was for them, but I supposed it was the same as for us. We boys got undressed in our dormitory and put on our nightshirts. Then we stood silently in line in the corridor outside the washroom in order of height, the smallest in front. This led to a certain amount of shoving and pushing, but as noise was severely frowned upon and a nun was there to supervise, there were no serious disputes. At intervals, on the call of "Next!" the washroom door opened, and the boy at the head of the line stripped off his nightshirt, threw it on a pile by the door, and slipped out of the chilly corridor into the steamy warmth of the washroom. Once inside, he was seized by a novice in a rubber apron and placed over a drain, where a bucket of warm water was tipped over his head. This was followed up by a squirt of liquid soap smelling of disinfectant. His head and body were then vigorously rubbed with the aid of a coarse cloth. After this, he passed on to an adjacent cubicle containing a shower head to rinse off the suds. His arrival was the signal for the boy preceding him to quit the cubicle into the hands of two further novices who were standing by with large rough towels. Once dry, he was equipped with a clean nightshirt, which might occasionally be more or less the right size, but in my case was usually much too long and had to be held up with one hand like a damsel curtsying to the king. The whole assembly line procedure was supervised by an elderly nun perched on a high stool like a tennis umpire, the wings of her starched wimple wilting in the damp. This ritual cleansing over, the purified orphan tiptoed back to the dormitory, where he remained on his knees by his bed until every one of the 12 beds possessed its respective penitent. At this point, the supervising nun would join us, the wings of her wimple regaining their stiffness but opening less angelically, to lead us in the evening prayer that would protect us from the demons of the night. That this prayer was not always effective was proved by the bomb that destroyed the orphanage. I had, of course, heard of baths, even seen a film in which a shapely young woman, not at all like a nun, had coyly immersed herself into a splendid basin overflowing with foam. She then smiled beatifically into the camera, delicately lifting a slender leg encased in bubbles, which she lightly blew into the face of the onlooker. The whole thing seemed hugely delightful. After all, perhaps I might enjoy a bath, even though it meant being home early. "Took you a long time to put my bike away," complained my aunt as I returned through the back door. "My bath is almost ready." She was clad ludicrously in what looked like a man's bathrobe that came to just below the knees. Her skinny, hairy legs protruded underneath to end in bright red carpet slippers, each decorated with a yellow pom-pom at the toe. On her head was a shapeless waterproof hat that might have belonged to a North Sea fisherman, were it not for the fact that it was brilliantly printed with poppies and marigolds. I'd always thought the nun's costume rather quaint, but this was downright absurd. "Hurry up now," she said. "Get undressed and put on your dressing gown while I take my bath. As soon as I've finished, you can have yours." My aunt pronounced this last sentence in the manner of someone conferring a great privilege. She went into the bathroom and closed the door. I heard the geyser give a pop as the gas was turned off. Then the water was turned off too, and there was silence except for a faint splashing. I went to my room and got undressed. I took advantage of the moment to examine my ribs. It was worth the trouble. The vividness was fading, but as though to compensate for this, the colours had become more varied, with a subtle new blend of yellows and purples, fading into a fascinating pastel of delicate blues. I wondered vaguely if it would be possible to have the skin removed and sold to an art gallery for a huge sum, but decided that it was probably impractical and certainly painful. I put on my new dressing gown. It was an arrival gift from my aunt. I'd never had one before. I wandered out of my room towards the bathroom, believing that I still had plenty of time, for I had not heard the geyser start up for my bath. To my surprise, my aunt stood on the threshold of the bathroom, clad as before, except for the hat. "Come along, hurry up, the water's getting cold." Was I to have the first bath after all? She followed me into the bathroom. I held the dressing gown closely around me. I didn't like the idea of my aunt seeing me without it. "Hurry up, Slowcoach. No need to be shy. I know what boys look like. Get that dressing gown off and into the bath." I took the dressing gown off reluctantly and peered into the tub. "But there's hardly any water." "Hardly any water?" echoed my aunt. "What do you think this is, Buckingham Palace? Don't you know there's a war on? 3 inches per person per week is the regulation to save energy for the war effort, and there's at least 3½ inches there." She reached behind my back and unhooked a curious object from the geyser and plunged it into the water. I had seen it hanging there and wondered what it was for. Now I was given a practical demonstration. It was a celluloid depth gauge especially designed to help people comply with the wartime regulation. "Now, in you get," she said peremptorily. "But the water's not clean." She bridled at this. "Not clean?" she nearly shouted. "Not clean? Are you insinuating that I'm dirty? I'm the only one that's used it. How dare you say it's not clean? Get in there immediately, or I'll show you whether it's clean or not." This threat of violence utterly defeated my objections. Very reluctantly, I cocked a leg over the side of the bath and climbed in. I stood there, in 3½ inches of second-hand tepid water, my elbows pressed to my sides, shivering like a puppy submitting to its first shampoo. "Sit down, then," cried my aunt impatiently. "I'll wash your back." I sat gingerly down, my whole body cringing from contact with the grey, lukewarm liquid. She rubbed my back vigorously with a coarse cloth. It hurt, and I cringed even more, keeping my elbows fast to my sides. "No need to act as though you like to be dirty," said my aunt petulantly. "Anyone would think you'd never taken a bath before." I didn't think it would be helpful to tell her that indeed this was true. She went thoroughly around my neck and shoulders and poked a corner of the cloth into each ear. The experience was abominably uncomfortable and humiliating. "Stand up now," she ordered. "I'll wash your waist and legs." I reached out with my hands to grasp the sides of the bath and stood up. It was best to cooperate to the maximum and get this nightmarish experience over as quickly as possible. As soon as I stood up, she noticed for the first time the bruises around my middle. "My God!" she exclaimed. It was the first and only time I ever heard this extremely pious woman break the third commandment. "What have you done to yourself?" She bent to examine me. I didn't want to tell her that it was not so much what I had done, but rather what had been done to me. I used my customary story. "I already told you, Aunt. I fell down." "You mean you did this today?" she exclaimed, peering at me even more closely. "I fell down this afternoon," I said. It was not a lie. "Looks older to me than that," she observed correctly. "Does it hurt?" "Only when you rub hard," I replied craftily. I carefully refrained from any comment on her first observation. Oh, all right then." And she resumed her detestable washing of my reluctant body, but with slightly less vigour than before. When it was done, she took a sponge, wet it in the bath, and squeezed its revolting contents over me to rinse off the soap. At last, the interminably hateful procedure came to an end. She pulled the plug from the bath, and the ghastly grey fluid it contained began to gurgle away. "You can step out now," she said, holding a skimpy towel at the ready. "Do you mind if I dry myself? I've got some painful places, and I'd rather deal with them on my own." "Oh, all right," said my aunt grumpily. "But be sure you dry yourself properly under your arms and behind your ears." Did she think I was a baby, or did she just enjoy tormenting me? This was a question I was later to turn over frequently in my mind, but for the immediate I was at last released from her water torture chamber, and I gave thanks. Her bath ritual wouldn't do for Hollywood, I thought. I got myself dry, shook myself into my dressing gown that felt protectively secure after the frigid exposed nakedness of the bath, and set off towards my room to get dressed. I was intercepted by my aunt, who, in her long night-dress and hanging hair, reminded me of engravings of Dickens' Gaunt Scrooge. "Isn't it nice to feel clean all over?" she asked. I said nothing in reply. I felt it would be less than tactful to point out that never since I had arrived in Widlington had I felt so disgustedly dirty. "Just put your pyjamas on for supper. Not worthwhile getting dressed again. I have to get up early for first mass tomorrow." Was she implying that I too had to get up early for first mass? And how early was early? As though guessing my unspoken question, she said, "No need to get up with me. You can get up when I leave, to make breakfast for when I get back." I had often thought the nuns egoistic with their remote, holier-than-thou ways, and their knack of recruiting their hapless charges for all the unpleasant jobs, like weeding the garden, sweeping out the dining room, and cleaning their shoes. But in this line, I was beginning to think that my aunt was front runner for the gold medal. She didn't help this impression by adding, as though it were a great favour, "You can come with me to the 11 o'clock service. It might do you good, and teach you to appreciate those who are only concerned for your welfare." I knew what she was getting at. I could have puked. "Hurry up now, get your pyjamas on, and come and sit at table. I've a lovely piece of cod for supper. We'll have it with some salad and a slice of bread." I thought of Mrs. King's comforting sausage and mash, and wished heartily that I could be with her and Winifred rather than here. I longed for Monday to come around, even though with it came the menace of the slug and his clique. We ate our meal in silence, as she had put the wireless on to listen to a concert. This was not unpleasing. I enjoyed music. It was infinitely preferable to any kind of discussion with my aunt, as these were becoming recitals of my shortcomings and failings, rather than pleasant two-way conversations. The meal finished and the concert over, she said to me, "I've had a tiring week, and I'm going to bed. As I've got to get up early, I'll leave you to do the washing up. Don't forget to say your prayers before you get into bed, and thank God for all your blessings. Good night." And she went off in the direction of her bedroom.